The fascist dictator Franco and the Spanish Civil War, year 1931. In years dominated by uncertainty, the ongoing conflict between socialists and fascists gave way to the Spanish Civil War in 1936, during which a few generals took advantage of the situation and staged a coup in the country. Emerging victorious with the help of Hitler and Mussolini, after 3 years of the Spanish Civil War, General Franco ruled the country with an iron fist until his death in 1975. So, how these events unfold that led Spain into a civil war? To find the answers to these questions, be sure to watch the video until the end. Leave supported comments and do not forget to hit the like button. When the dates showed December 4th, 1892, in the northwest of Spain, in the coastal city of Ferrol on the Atlantic Ocean, a son was born to a family of Andalus descent, Francisco Franco. Since childhood, Franco's goal was to join the Spanish Royal Navy. Although he failed to achieve, he entered the Toledo Infantry Academy in 1907, graduated successfully in 1910. During this time, Spain began to colonize northern Morocco. Franco volunteered for this war and went to Morocco in 1912, where he served for many years. In 1921, by resisting against the Spanish and French forces and establishing the Rif Republic in Morocco, and successfully fighting against Abdul Karim, who inflicted heavy losses on the Spanish army, Franco achieved significant victories. With this struggle, he rapidly rose in ranks and became a general at the age of 33 in 1926, thus becoming the youngest general in Europe after Napoleon. After a successful career, becoming a general at a young age made him a hero among Spanish nationalists, and in 1928 he was appointed as the commander of the Zaragoza Military Academy. When the year 1930 arrived, after 8 years of military rule under the leadership of Rivera, which ended, socialists began organizing demonstrations street by street to proclaim the Republic. Although King Alfonso XIII ignored these demonstrations in 1931, he was forced to hold municipal elections nationwide. These elections, held for the first time in Spain since 1873, showed a crushing superiority of socialist candidates over the candidates supported by King Alfonso XIII. Exhausted by years of rule and faced with failure in the elections, King Alfonso had to step down from his duty. In the same year, while he deposed king went into exile in Italy, the Second Spanish Republic was declared in late 1931. Following the proclamation of the Republic, socialists who came to power under the leadership of Zamora, fearing a military coup, began to pursue an intense anti militarist policy. As a first step, they closed down by Zaragoza Military Academy under Franco's command and relegated Franco to a passive duty. While Franco already had a hatred for socialists, being relegated by them to a passive duty further worsened his view of them. Beginning to plan a coup against the government, Franco realized that the only way to succeed was to bring King Alfonso XIII back to power. However, King Alfonso XIII, including the nationalist, was a very tarnished and unloved figure in the eyes of the Spanish people. Therefore, giving up on this idea, Franco found it more appropriate to garner support from the people in the face of the mistakes the socialist government would make and decided to postpone his plans for a while. In the general elections held in October 1933, the inclusion of the right wing party, which won 90 seats, in the government came as a surprise to everyone. This event led to Franco, who was kept in a passive duty, being reinstated to active duty by the Spanish government. However, the Spanish left, which became even more organized and armed during its 2.5 years of power, was not willing to accept a defeat in the elections. In October 1934, with the entry of the right wing party into the government, socialists called for strikes nationwide. With the incitement of all socialists in the country, a revolt began, and the leftist and anarchist organizations burning down churches, killing priests, provoked a strong reaction throughout Spain. Following these events, under the leadership of Garcia, the right wing government assigned General Franco with full authority to suppress the uprising. Immediately, taking action, General Franco began to suppress the uprising in a harsh manner and didn't hesitate to massacre thousands of people involved in the events. After a year in this chaotic environment, with major corruption and scandals emerging in the right wing government, the elections held in February 1936 were won again by the Socialist Party. Now, the ideological struggle that had prevailed throughout the country had turned into an armed conflict. After a year in this chaotic environment, with major corruption and scandals emerging in the right wing government, the elections held in February 1936 were won again by the Socialist Party. Following the outcome of the elections, the assassination of Sotelo, the main figure of the nationalist opposition, by socialists in July was the final straw for the Spanish right wing. Now, the ultimate opportunity awaited General Franco and his fellow plotters had arrived. Franco's declaration of military uprising echoed from a radio station in the Canary Islands in the early hours of July 18, 1936. Without being part of the chain of command, the Spanish army, under the leadership of three generals, Jose Sanjurjo, Emilio Mola, and Francisco Franco, began the uprising. The next day, Franco, crossing from the Canary Islands to Morocco, seized control of the Spanish army there, began preparations for landing on the mainland. As the country was virtually divided politically, geographically, and militarily, the footsteps of civil war were heard louder day by day. Following the coup, it was decided that General Mola would lead the military committee. In a speech he made, Mola revealed how ruthless he was by stating, "We need to spread fear. Anyone who doesn't think like us should be eliminated without hesitation." Although the vast majority of the Spanish army compiled with Mola's terrifying statements, armed socialist groups in important cities such as Madrid, Seville, Malaga, Barcelona, Dijon, and Valencia managed to defeat the rebel soldiers. While the Spanish army was more successful around Madrid and its outskirts and in the north, it largely failed to capture cities on the south and west coast of Spain. As the coup attempt continued, General Sanjurjo died in a suspicious plane crash on July 20, 1936, leaving behind the two leaders of the coup. With each passing day, General Franco began to take more control, attempting to subdue socialist leaning peasants in rural, rural areas and imprisoning or executing those who resisted, depending on the region. However, despite all these efforts, the rebels could not make the progress they desired, and the socialists expanded the areas under their control by day. During this period, Franco came up with the idea of seeking help from Italian leader Mussolini and German leader Hitler. After meetings between the three leaders, Mussolini and Hitler provided Franco with extensive assistance on July 29, 1936. Initially, European states had decided not to send weapons to the warring parties after the start of the Civil War. However, Hitler and Mussolini did not comply with this decision, and this situation deeply affected the course of the war. Mussolini even went further and sent 70,000 Italian soldiers to Spain, 50,000 of whom were permanent, to fight alongside the revolutionists. Soviet leader Stalin, on the other hand, adhered to the agreement and did not provide weapons aid to the socialists, while staying away from intervention to avoid provoking Germany and Italy. Therefore, most of the support acquired by the socialists at the beginning of the Civil War did not go beyond morale. As the Civil War raged on, Franco launched a full scale offensive with the support of Hitler and Mussolini, as well as reinforcements arriving from Africa. Initially, capturing Seville, Franco massacred the resistors in the cities he passed through as he advanced towards Madrid, burning and destroying their homes. The takeover of the Basque region by the revolutionist forces and Franco's gradual approach towards the capital, Madrid, began to seriously intimidate the socialists. Upon this, the socialists, after receiving negative responses to their request for help from France and England, turned to Stalin as a last resort. The Soviet Union, agreeing to provide weapons aid in exchange for gold, sent a convoy consisting of heavy weapons and tanks to Spain on October 24, 1936. However, when the convoy reached Spain, it was understood that the Soviet government had sent the most useless and the worst weapons they had, leaving the socialists disappointed. In Germany, Hitler sent over 50,000 volunteers, along with state of the art aircraft fleets, to support Franco in the rebel zones. In November 1936, as the revolutionaries reached the outskirts of Madrid, socialist government officials, convinced that the city would fall, fled to Valencia, while the civilian resistors, remaining in Madrid, began to defend the capital by seizing the weapons received from the Soviets. They managed to stop Franco. As resistance continued at full speed in Madrid, on February 7th, 1937, Italian troops, surpassing the weak defense of the southern city of Guadalajara, executed all the resistors. Delighted with the success, Mussolini convinced Franco to launch a dual pronged attack on the east of Madrid. Italian troops would attack Madrid from Guadalajara, while Franco would attack from the south. However, soon after, the Italians suffered defeat in the face of harsh weather conditions and the fiery resistance of the socialists, leaving Mussolini horrified as he watched his destroyed troops. Towards the end of 1937, as the civil war spread to all regions, the revolutionists managed to completely control the surroundings of Madrid. However, these achievements, differences of opinion began to rise between Franco and General Mola. While Franco did not want to lose the support of the royalist base, General Mola pursued an anti royalist policy. At this very moment, General Mola, like General Sanjurjo, died in a suspicious plane crash. Following this dubious crash, believed to have been arranged by Franco, the leadership of the right wing was passed on to General Franco. When the year 1938 arrived, the exhausted socialists began to flee from Spain to neighboring countries. This was because Franco, backed by Fascist Italy and Nazi Germany, launched an attack on Madrid from all sides. With the increasing support from external sources, Franco managed to gain control of the two-thirds of the country by April 1938, with a force three times larger. With new advancements throughout the year, victory drew closer, and Franco's forces seized all regions outside Madrid and Catalonia. Then the Catalonia campaign, which began in December 1938, yielded results quickly, with Franco entering Barcelona, causing 250,000 people to flee to France from Catalonia, with Republicans making their final struggles and becoming exhausted. They found themselves trapped between Barcelona and Madrid. Although they received weapons aid from the Soviet Union with a last hope, this aid was not sufficient to defeat the revolutionists, and the government had to accept defeat. Seizing the desperation of the socialists, Franco, in March 1939, captured all of Spain in a major offensive, 5 months before the start of World War II, on April 1st, 1939. Franco received the title of El Caudillo, meaning the leader who guides on horseback, and his slogan was "One country, one state, one leader." The Civil War was over, but for the thousands of fleeing refugees, terror was just beginning for the terrified socialist civilians. Over 3 years of war had left Spain in ruins, and the economic devastation worsened with the world crisis brought on by World War II, turning it into a country grappling with hunger. During this time, Franco pursued frugal policies to combat hunger and restore the devastation of the war. He then banned Catalan and Basque languages spoken in the country besides Spanish. Additionally, in accordance with the guidelines, he imposed bans on divorce, women traveling alone, inheriting and opening bank accounts. Although Hitler provided considerable assistance during the Civil War, Franco began to resent him due to Hitler's negative attitude towards Christianity. Moreover, Hitler's invasion of Poland, a Catholic country, in September 39, and his victory in World War II greatly disturbed Franco. Despite Hitler and Mussolini's intense support during the Spanish Civil War, Franco chose to evade their efforts to drag him into the war. After Germany's invasion of France in 1940, Hitler exerted great pressure on Franco to occupy Gibraltar. But despite all the pressure, Franco avoided direct involvement in the war. However, due to Hitler's intense pressure, Franco formed a unit called the Blue Division, consisting of 50,000 volunteers, and sent them to Leningrad in 1941 to fight against the Soviet Union. After the end of the war, with Hitler's defeat in 1945, Franco, as the only remaining Hitler ally in power, began to be targeted in Western countries. In the second half of 1945, Western allies, especially the United States and France, began to send messages that they could launch operations to overthrow the Franco regime in Spain. Spanish leftists, who had formed an exile government in France after the Spanish Civil War, also began to prepare for this operation. Initially, it was decided to isolate the Franco regime from the world, and Spain was not admitted to the United Nations established in 1945. In 1946, a United Nations resolution required all member states to sever all relations with the Franco regime and close their diplomatic representatives in Madrid. Although Turkey, which recognized the Franco regime as the legitimate representative of Spain in January 1938 and immediately established diplomatic relations, had good relations with Franco. It had to comply with this decision and call back its ambassador in Madrid to Ankara. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, Franco began to prepare for resistance against the possibility of occupation of Spain. However, the escalation of tension between the United States and the Soviet Union, which began in 1946 and turned into the Cold War in 1947, was a development that saved Franco. While the Franco regime remained isolated for a while longer, it soon ceased to be a target for America. With the signing of the Madrid Pact between the United States and Spain in 1953, the United States provided financial aid to Spain, and Franco allowed the United States to establish an air base in Spain. With this development, as Spain's relations with other European countries began to normalize, Spain was admitted to the United Nations in 1955. Franco began to attach great importance not only to strategic cooperation with Western countries, but also to turning Spain into an economic power and lifting it out of poverty. Making great strides in industrialization, especially in the automotive sector and tourism, Spain became the world's second fastest growing economy after Japan. As the years passed and the 1970s approached, Franco, suffering from Parkinson's disease and advancing age, decided to determine who would govern Spain after him. Franco believed that Juan Carlos, who had received a good military education and joined the army, was ideologically compatible with him, got along well with him, and he believed that after his death, the regime would be continued by Juan Carlos. In 1968, an organization called ETA was established in the Basque region, which was uncomfortable with Franco's style of governance, to fight for independence. ETA, starting from 1968, began an armed struggle against the Franco regime by carrying out deadly bombings. Facing trouble both from his illness and the ETA organization, Franco began to experience difficult days due to the oil crisis that rocked the world in 1973. The crisis undermines Spain's long standing high growth rate, increasing dissatisfaction with the Franco regime, which had promised only economic development to the people. In the same year, Franco decided to hand over the prime minister's office due to his worsening condition. In 1973, General Blanco, who was Franco's right hand man during the Civil War, became Spain's new prime minister. However, just 6 months later, on December 20, 1973, ETA killed General Blanco in a bomb attack. Franco then announced that he was handing over all governance to Juan Carlos, whom he had declared his heir. Only 2 months later, on September 2nd, 1974, he decided to take back the administration, but due to his deteriorating condition, he couldn't even appear before the public. As opposition awaited his death eagerly, General Francisco Franco passed away on November 20, 1975, at the age of 83. Unlike Franco, Juan Carlos promised the people democratization. After 36 years under dictatorship, Spain managed to become a democratic country again through elections held in 1977. Thanks.